All right, hola people, Wacka here with a special guest. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Mr. Rage, or as Michael likes to call me, as bitch.
Yeah, I haven't used that one often, but sure. We're here for our Sacred Dwarf Swine Season 5 Powie Winkies, and I can't believe it's Season 5 already, Jesus. To be fair, we don't do off seasons because of what happened the first time, but um, yeah. This season, for the two people that are watching that aren't playing, Um, we decided to ban the cringe top mons like Mega Diancie and Victini. Um, and then we banned like about 40 Pokemon in the middle, and a lot of the targets end up being like fairy types. So if that's why some of the teams look weird, it's probably because the best fairy type on the board was all creamy, probably. Um, but yeah, it was a fun draft. Honestly, I would probably do that again. Like, and it was interesting to see like what other people drafted, and just so that you guys are aware, just if you get a low spot or like a placing on PRs that you didn't want or expect, your team isn't necessarily bad, but the way I did PRs, it was statistically worse than other teams. So yeah, I just wanted
Nah,
to.
it's not. It's because Waka hates your team. That's the only reason.
That is so true. I hate every team though. I hate mine. So with that said, let's start with number 16, who is I believe Chocolate Lab. I don't have like the names of the people's teams because of the way uh
so
things
number
don't fit on
16 is
OBS.
number 16 is the Gaylord Gastrodons, coached by Mr. Chocolate Web. His team is Manaphy, Atera Wochian, Volcarona, Darmanitan Galar, Megapidgeot, Cavalion, Lycanroc Dusk, Zygarde 10%, Aleki, Alakazam, as I think Wacko will call it, the baby flower bitch.
Yes, baby flower bitch. Um, yeah, this is an interesting team. Honestly, I thought it started off pretty well, even with like round two Terra Wochian, because I believe he said when he drafted it that he was gonna Terastallize Wochian. Is like, you know what? That's fair enough, because a lot of people drafted a lot of low tiers pretty early. There was like round one Enamor so I don't really blame round two Wochian is like anything to get down about. But the issues with this team kind of lie with like um Wochian being the defense, whereas like everything else, like Manaphy and Cobalion can be bulky. I guess Volcarona can be kind of fat too, but it's like
Yeah.
not like it's not the greatest for
This
like in
team's
terms of fat.
issue this team's issue mostly stems from the fact that even though its offense is very strong, it only has one way to win, which is setting up with Manaphy, Volcarona, or Zydog. If it doesn't do that, none of its offense is going to be strong enough to win the game on its own. And because of his relative lack of pivoting, he was not going to be able to play the team hyper offense like it's kind of being profiled as. And as Waka already mentioned, the Terra Wochian and the Cobalion are literally the only defense on this entire team outside of some weird fringe sets.
Yeah.
So it's gonna have a hard time. It's gonna have a hard time winning in that regard because of its lack of utility and lack of pivoting. Because he isn't going to even be able to play it like the hyper offense that it's profiling as.
I will say though that I kind of like the top four mons with Regieleki, that they all kind of scare, even Mega Pidgeot kind of scares off like a lot of the mons that want to switch in on Reggie, like the fat grasses and the fat grounds. None of them want to really come versus that top five. So I think he
Yeah,
did like decently well with like a hyper offense around if he wants to win with Regieleki. But like we said, like in draft, you definitely want like you know to take a hit because
And
if your opponent sets up with speed especially and they kind of and like you don't have Manaphy or Rochian around, then you kind of just lose.
yeah, and like kind of as you alluded to, I actually had this team a couple spots higher in my little list, just because of what you mentioned, where there are a lot of relatively scary things on this team, and there are some teams in this division I think just don't have too much stuff that scares me, but the problems outweigh the benefits, and it's going to be really, really hard for him to win with.
Yeah. Um, there's not to say that this team won't win any games though. Like it'll definitely if someone doesn't prep for the right thing, then they can easily kind of just lose. Um,
Yeah,
but you have to keep up the pressure for sure.
yeah. It's basically this team's only way to win is to keep momentum, and the minute it loses it, it just loses like 2 or 3 months because it has nothing that can switch into stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. But with that said, we can get on to number 15, who is yeah, that's a Jag. That is for sure Jag.
Uh, yeah, number 15. Yeah, number 15, as Micah mentioned, is the Portland Pincers. Coach Minister Jack 57. His team is the Mega Heracross, Gengar, Mandibuzz, Hisui Gudra, Raikou, Aromatisse, Dugtrio, Terra, Arachnid, Komala, Arcanine, Hisui, and Celebi. You can give your thoughts on this first, Micah.
Um, honestly, I don't mind all these mons except for I think Doug Trio is like kind of a weird fit. Although it does offer like the speed tier that he probably wants that's faster than Raikou. Although with like the top mons being banned, I don't think 115 being the fastest is like necessarily a bad thing at all. But the main issues that I had with this team was kind of the lack of removal, being mainly Mandibuzz and I guess Komala, but I don't know. Maybe I am blind. I mean, I'm half blind, but I've never seen Komala click Rapid Spin. It's always been like Choice Band, like Last Resort, or like Assault Vest pivoting type thing, and even then, Komala only comes to like 2 games. So if he wants to remove hazards for like Mega Heracross, because it doesn't really want to switch in on like Spikes or Stealth Rock too much. Even like Aromatisse as like a bulky fairy trying to Wish Pass, if it's switching in on Stealth Rock and Spikes, then it's probably going to be just Wish Passing on itself rather than supporting the team. So the lack of removal is a little iffy.
Mm-hmm. To kind of expand upon that, I also see the lack of removal. Mandibuzz is one of those mons, especially with it not being able to be taunted, that can get defog off pretty reliably, but even then, it's not the easiest thing to use, especially when it's your only option, and Mandibuzz can tend to be set up fodder in certain matchups, especially on the special side. And the other thing that I personally didn't care for much about this team was the lack of good hazard setting outside of Sticky Web Spider. The main reason for that is the combination of his lack of pretty good hazards and the fact that he only has 2 true breakers on his team. Is going to make it really, really hard for him to break through the bulkier mons in the format. Like even breaking through his own Mandibuzz would be extremely difficult for him because of his lack of hazard pressure and his only breakers basically being the top 2 plus Arcanine. So he's just gonna have a hard time breaking through certain teams without manufactured setup, and that's not an easy thing to do every week.
Mm-hmm. Though there are matchups where I feel like Gudra, even with like Spadef Assault Vest can just kind of break through things with clicking Heavy Slam for whatever freaking reason. But yeah, I definitely see the struggle there too. He might have to try to rely on like Doug Trio to like trap things and remove them, but
Yeah.
uh, it's not the most reliable mon at doing that, really.
Yeah.
But hopefully,
I do think.
Araquanid I could see doing stuff too because, like Terra Water, what's the item? I think it's Mystic Water.
Yeah.
Yeah, like liquidations from that is gonna hit like a truck.
Mhm. Yeah, no, like that'll definitely help it a little bit, but it's still so slow and has such a flying weakness. Well, it'll be tearing, I guess, but it's still not going to be able to play as well as it needs to if it's going to be forced into like a bulky offensive role every week as opposed to trying to play more what it wants to play.
Right. Yeah. So those are the main issues with this team. I actually like all of the mons like overall, but it just kind of didn't add up together super well.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I think I personally had this team at number 12, so I definitely like the Mons as well, and I think Mega Heracross with Trailblaze is just very funny.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that's what I had it
well,
tiered high for that reason specifically. So I was curious to
yeah.
see if anyone would pick it up. But yeah, moving
So
on to number 14 is this Joey's team?
yeah, Joey's team. Uh, yeah, number 14 is the Los Angeles Needle Kings, coached by Joey. His team is a Megalop, Soul King, Ceruledge, a Mungus, a Terra Comfey, a Salamence, a Magnezone, a Iron Jugulus, a Gligar, a Excelgor, and an Arctozolt.
Yeah, so this team is interesting. When it was getting drafted, um, I was like, I was thinking that it started off like decent. Maybe he grabbed Ceruledge a little early, or even like Amoonguss kind of early, because I wasn't sure if those would get drafted. At least like at that time, and even like Comfy. It's just like a lot of the mons I feel like don't feel that great, and some of them don't really have that great of synergy, other than like the regen core, and I think maybe like Future Sight, Slowking, and Megalopony or Ceruledge, I think theoretically should work pretty well together.
I honestly feel like if you were to improve the four mons between Magnezone and Excelgor, this team would probably be significantly higher. Because I think the top six, even though you're right that he overdrafted some stuff, is actually quite good. It's just those four kind of add very little value to his team, and it just kind of exacerbates the holes that his roster already had.
Right, yeah, I feel like he didn't really need a Selgor, although his hazards are like his hazards are so weak otherwise
Yeah.
that I can see why he has a Selgor. Although I honestly would have preferred it to be like Carkol and he could have upgraded like Gligar into better ground because he already has two flyings. And honestly, I don't really see why Iron Jugulus is on this team. It's like a cool mon, but it kind of relies on hitting like Hurricane and all that kind of garbage. I don't know. It's a cool mon, but I feel like you either want like electric terrain or you want rain with it, and it has neither to support it.
Yeah, it'll be kind of awkward to give opportunities with this team. Granted, he has a extremely good slow pivot with Slowking and pretty good support for it because it does have basically perfect synergy with Lopunny and Ceruledge, obviously minus Rock weakness and Fairy weakness, but they cover each other's weaknesses really well for that being like his primary offense.
Yeah.
Also, the other pretty huge issue that I see, you already mentioned it, is the hazards. He's, at least in my experience, people basically never bring Excelgor, and if they do bring Excelgor, it's not to click T-Spike Spikes.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever
So
seen a Selgor quick spikes. It's always like throat spray offensive or something like that.
yeah, so like in reality, his only true hazard setter is Gligar and Amoonguss, and that's
Mungus doesn't
okay.
get
Gligar's
Mungus doesn't
does
get
it not even
T-spikes. Nope.
does it not even get T-spikes? Oh,
Nope,
darn.
it's just Gligar and
Well,
Selgor.
darn. Well, that just makes it worse. And Gligar is a pretty good rock setter. If you know the lawn in front of you doesn't have taunt, it can usually get it off for free. But it's still, it being the only option will just lead to it getting prepped against with ice coverage and whatever else, and that will lead to hazards being basically non-existent, and then it having basically the exact same problem that Jared's team does, where it's going to struggle to break through certain teams without manufactured setup.
Yeah. Although I don't
Also,
feel
this
like
team
it's
is
as bad because on their own, Mega Lopunny, Salamence, and Magnezone like can do that stuff. Even Arctozolt.
true.
But Arctozolt kind of needs the support from Slowking Chili Reception specifically, which, to be honest, in my experience using it, I've struggled to kind of bring Chili Reception specifically more than Teleport.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think
I will also say this team is pretty Rocky Helmet weak as well, because a lot of stuff wants to U-turn to put physical contact moves. So
Yeah,
Rocky Helmet
100%.
would do quite a number on this roster.
Yeah. But I think we can move on to our number, what are we on, 12? 13?
13.
13.
13.
Zelda and the Warsaw Rapidash with
Yeah.
Cephalon, Cyclozar, Terrakion, Porygon 2, Crocodile, Bronzong, and Polion, Mega Gardevoir, Articuno, Cloyster, and Sliggoo.
So personally, I think this is the worst team in the div by some margin. Mostly because it has very little offense that truly scares me. Blacephalon and Terrakion are both very niche in what they can do, even though they both can be scary behind a shed tail in certain instances, and obviously Mega Guard can hit pretty hard. But the main thing is I don't know when you ever get opportunity to actually set that up, because basically any fighting type with access to knockoff or EQ just 6-0s his team. And that's going to be extremely difficult for him to deal with. I do like the hazard setting. He has really good hazards, and the removal is pretty solid for what it is with the Defog Empo, Defog Articuno, and the Rapid Spin Supervisor and Cloyster. But overall, I feel like this team's fighting weakness is just going to be so hard for it to overcome, because if he face anybody who knows what they're doing, they're basically just going to bring fighting coverage on every single mon, and you're just not going to be able to survive long enough to do anything.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of like overlap on this team. Like, I'm not sure why you added Porygon 2 after you had Cyclozar. I mean, sure, it's a bulky normal, but you're already getting Crook, which is fine enough as a dark. And you could have even got like a different dark type later, but then like instead of grabbing a fighting resist as your psychic, you grabbed your psychic that was part steel, and your other psychic type has like 12 defense, which made no sense to me. And you're flying.
And proceeded to double steal with basically identical utility anyway, so I don't know what the point of Bronzong is at all.
Yeah, honestly, from what I was seeing, it should have just been like Galarian Slowbro. Though Galarian Slowbro also like has issues on this team. It just does better as a fighting resist, like as an example.
Very true. Very true. Also, the other big weakness that I didn't even notice when we talked about this a few days ago is this team has no poison type. Period. Like, not even a flying
poison.
one.
There's also no grass and no electric, so the only way to break polar waters specifically is freeze dry.
That and T-Spikes is just a nightmare on this team. Because basically Boots is going to be forced on a lot of these ones, and there's things like Porygon 2, which literally hate Toxic Spikes because it has to run EVO most times. So yeah, I mean, obviously Zelda will find a way to win games with this, but it's not a team for me at all.
Yeah, honestly, the reason why it's above some of the other teams is mostly because of Shedtail and Cloyster, and I'm interested to see what Articuno Terra does, because I feel like Ice Flying is such a horrible typing, but Articuno has decent stats, so it has potential.
Yeah.
I mean, Articuno could work as your poison. You come in, you're not weak to T-Spikes, because you're flying, you can turn into poison, or whatever the fuck you want. You can't Terra Blast, but I mean, you have Freeze Dry, so who gives a shit? So
honestly,
Articuno can be makeshift, but it's not ideal because you don't want to bring Articuno above literally anything else on this team except for Sliggoo, which is just kind of there as a 1-point mon.
Also, as you already mentioned, if he were to make that Bronzong into even like a Swalot, this team would get immediately quite a bit better because it would give him an actual fighting resist. And Bronzong does literally nothing here. It is worse at everything it wants to do.
Honestly, no. Just get rid of Bronzong, get like a Grass and Electric, get rid of Sliggoo, get Swalot.
Honestly, he could. Honestly,
that's
yeah.
Like,
honestly, that
if
would
you
work.
want
If
to
you
do
were
like
to
minimal changes, that's what I would do.
Honestly, that would work. If you were to be able to get rid of Bronzong for Rotom-Mow or
it's not even on the
Electros and get
something like that.
Well, yeah. You know what I mean. Like one of the levitating electrics, and then replace Sliggoo for a Swalot or Muck, like you said. This team would get quite a bit better.
Yeah, like it's not too far off of being a good team.
Yeah,
I would probably get a better fighting resist though than Muck or Swalot, but yeah. Anyways, we can move on to our number 12, which is Pistol Pete. I don't remember what the hell his team name was. Something Detroit.
Pistol Pete's team name is the Detroit Dug Trios. It consists of Great Tusk, Zardwai, Slowbro, Zorwar Kasui, Venusaur, Lokix, Slurpuff, Noivern, Registeel, Iron Thorns, and the Walrus. Overall, I put this team pretty low, just because I feel like the synergy is a bit awkward and it relies too much on 5 turns on Y-Sun. But there are things I like about this team. Great Tusk, Slowbro, and Zoroark are 3 of my favorite mons in this Napdex meta. Lokix is extremely strong in a lot of matchups, and I think Terra Slurpuff, especially if it's played right with that leader run, can be one of the best mons in this format, and maybe the kill leader.
Yeah, honestly, Terra Slurpuff, if you aren't an idiot with it, you can probably just win games with that alone. Because it doesn't have like the best coverage, but Drain Punch in return with Stab is usually enough if you're like going Belly Drum. But of course, you can always like Calm Mind. You could even like Terra Fairy Draining Kiss just to like get more damage and recovery off of Draining Kiss itself. Or like defensive Terra, so you can't get like poisoned. It can be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think this team is a assumption of parts that doesn't go as well together as it could. But I like the mons on this team more than I like the mons on some of the other ones that we've already covered.
Yeah, I will say though, I honestly, I was kind of a fan of Iron Thorns, like, in the beginning of Gen 9, but just kind of looking at it from, like, a prep perspective, like, it doesn't switch into anything. Like, it is so hard to use Iron Thorns without, like, Terra, which obviously it was banned from Terra because I think if it was able to Terastallize, it would be a little too good. Well, it wouldn't be like broken, but it's too good for like low tier Terra. Um, but I mean, as a hazard setter, sure, I guess. Um, and it can like volt switch around. I also for a Zard Y team, I didn't really like that Tusk and Noivern are like the supporting like removal. I don't think the removal in this league was like too good to begin with because stuff like Zapdos and Torn were banned. So you kind of already had to dig into low tiers to find removal.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I feel like Noivern is like it doesn't really like clicking defog a lot, and I feel like if it's running a defog set, then it doesn't really get progress in anything. And Tusk is a decent spinner, I'll give it that, but I feel like Tusk is better off just clicking moves
Yeah.
that do damage. So Zard
Yeah,
Y might struggle to get in.
Yeah, that's fair. I also just noticed something else that this team really, really hates trying to take sun boosted flamethrowers. Like if you take out the Slowbro,
Oh yeah.
his best switch against sun boosted flamethrower is Iron Thorns.
Yeah, it's like Iron Thorns. I think that is why he grabbed Wall Rain as like a 2-point mon. I don't see him ever using it, but thick fat water type, sure.
Yeah, I mean it can do some stuff in that regard, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not a bad team. It's just gonna be interesting how he makes it work.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I kind of view it as a better version of what Chocolate Lab was trying to do, where it's a great assumption of parts with some very scary things, but in order for those things to work, the support really just isn't there. But he will win certain matchups just on preview because of great Tuscan Carousel Puff. So he'll have certain games that he wins for sure.
Yeah, and also there's always that looming threat of low kicks just deleting something because someone doesn't know how to prep for it. It's an awkward mon to prep for, honestly.
It totally is because of freaking tinted. Because I gave a first impression on tinted lens.
Yeah. Like, oh, you're 4 times resisted me. What if you died anyway?
Yeah, it's amazingly strong. Honestly, I really want to use it, but I haven't gotten a chance yet.
Yeah. So, what was that? I think that was number 12. We can move on to number 11, or else this video will be way too long. We got the round 1 Enamorstarian team. Let's go.
Yeah.
So we got TRK, the Reunited Kingdom, with Enamorstarian, Heatran, Latias, Mega Blastoise, Kamalola, Vikavolt, Mamoswine, Mousehold, My Husband, Mismagius, and Terrastakataka. This team is really fucking slow, which is my biggest issue, and I also just realized that the removal sucks ass too, because Latias does not like fitting defog because its stab combination already wants to fit like coverage to hit steals and roost.
Yeah.
So it's like Mega Blastoise removal, and I guess Mousehold Tidy Up works sometimes, but you also remove your own hazards, which your own hazards are okay. Chestnut can usually get up a spike, and Mamoswine forces out switches, so if you wanted to run Stealth Rock, you could get up a Stealth Rock, and honestly, I feel like something that I've done is run Stealth Rock on like choice band sets to like click rocks and then make people think that I'm not choice band and then just like murder something later. But yeah.
It's a good bluff.
Yeah, and then something interesting that I liked about this team was obviously Terrastakataka. I do think that Terra, Mismagius, Chestnut, or Mousehold could have probably just been better, and he could have just gotten a different Pokemon than Stacka. But I don't know. I'm interested to see what he might do with it. Honestly, I think he got it for Trick Room, just because the rest of the team is kind of slow. But I think Enamorous and Vikable benefit more from agility anyway. So I don't know. Your thoughts?
So I have two main issues with this team, and I have a special circumstance given the fact I literally just played it 10 minutes ago. So the two main issues and the things that are easy to exploit on this team are, one, its lack of being like, it's a very bulky team that can't really sustain itself against both hazards and hit chip damage, and as well as the fact that it is extremely susceptible to being revenged because of it being super slow. So the main way you kind of beat this team is just kind of pivoting around until you have all of his slow walls at the marks you need, and then because a lot of his team is passive, you just pick them on that can't touch whatever your sweeper is, click a setup move, and then you kind of just win. Because this team is too slow and doesn't have any real priority or speed to be able to revenge, with the exception of Ishar Mamswine.
Yeah, and because Mismagius and Mousehold are low tiers, like the only real speed is Latias, and that mon has kind of a lot of stuff that it needs to do for this team. Like, it kind of has to be removal, it kind of needs to be speed and utility type shit. So it's not really that scary for other people because it has to support his team.
Yeah, that's true. I think Taylor Sakataka was a really good pick, especially in the very last round. That Mon can just straight up win certain matchups. I actually like a lot of the low tier Terras that were picked up. I do agree with your reading that the utility is definitely lacking, especially for a stallier team like this. He picked up quite a lot of things that don't really want to be fitting a hazard move on, or that don't want to be fitting a status move on it, rather.
Yeah, it's not even that this team is stally either, because this team hits really fucking hard. Like, most of these mons have like over 130 in all their attack stats.
Yeah, true. That's actually
so
true.
slow.
There's a lot of slow nukes.
It's just so slow, so if you can like force a switch on this team, or like if you're facing this team and you can force them to switch out and like speed boost, for example, to be faster than like Mousehold, I guess, then they're kind of in trouble. Or if they don't bring their fast mons and they, well, I mean, he kind of lost to Overquill earlier.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Moving
and
on.
Also there's
you have more.
And also there's one last thing, there's a massive speed gap on this team from I believe it's 105 to 86, which basically means any base 100-ish mon runs adamant, which is not good at all.
Yeah, it's just 105 to 80.
Yeah.
I don't know what you thought the 86 was, but oh yeah, you can't see my screen, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Yeah. But moving on. We're getting into the mid teams now. I think this is number 10. So we got Kalkan with, what's his team name?
The Ajax Arcanines.
Okay, yeah, we got Tapu Fini, Goldingo, Zygarde, Weavile, Lucha, Toxtricity, Serena, Feraligatr, Mesprit, and Omastar. I think it's a solid team. Like, all of the mons are really good. There's just like a couple issues that kind of arise from it. Mainly both hazard setting and removal. That the hazard setting is atrocious. It's literally just Mesprit and Omastar because they dropped Glamora, which, in my opinion, I also don't really like Glamora that much, so I can see why. they dropped it. But Omastar doesn't really come to a lot of games, and even when it does come, it doesn't really hazard stack too much. And even then, like if you want to bring Omastar, sometimes it has games where it would rather just shell smash and try to sweep. Mesprit is a decent rocker though, and sometimes all you really need is rocks. And then if you want to get at toxic spikes with toxicity, if you don't want to lock into like boom burst, you might as well click T spikes sometimes in certain situations I can see. But other than that, because your ground and steel don't get rocks, I guess that's kind of the struggle you have to live with. Also, this team has no normal type, and the dark type is Weavile, so ghosts are definitely a struggle. And there's also a giant speed gap between Zygarde and technically Weavile, because Hawlucha's speed tier doesn't really count. Or at least that it doesn't count as much. So, your thoughts?
So, I echo everything you just said. Those are definitely major issues, Ghost and Hazards being chief among them. I think his removal is okay. But the Hazards and Ghost Resist are definitely the largest issues. To add more on top of that, pretty much every single Mon on his team, with the exception of Weavile, relies on either setup or a choice band or specs to be threatening. And that can lead to some issues, especially when you don't have a good screen setter. So it's gonna, I like this team more than every other one that we've worked at so far. I think by a decent margin, actually, because I think all the Mons in a vacuum are very, very good. It's just he's going to have some problems breaking through teams that bring a lot of phasing and encore and all that kind of stuff, because his team is so setup reliant.
Yeah, I can definitely see encore being an issue for like his slower setup. He does have Feraligatr, which I think is also a really solid Terra, and obviously Sheer Force is good because I believe it also gets a lot of coverage, or at least enough coverage. So being able to get stab along with like the Sheer Force Life Orb and +1 attack is kind of insane.
Yeah, honestly, Gator, Weavile are my two favorite Mons on this team. Both of them do their job incredibly well, and I'm excited to see how Terra Gator does, except when I have to play against it.
Yeah, honestly, I love every single Mon on this team. At least like design-wise, even kind of like what they do. And he has Mesprit as like the SDS mascot pick, so he has to have something going on.
Yeah, I think this team is just... I think this team is just a lot of really good stuff that doesn't go perfectly together, and that's okay. It'll still be a better team than most of the ones that we've looked at so far, but it's gonna face some issues with that negative synergy that certain Mons have.
Yeah, especially because most of the teams were just like they were drafted because Mons were fun. This team seemed more like he was trying to go for like a synergy, but there wasn't a lot of options, so it kind of got messed up towards the end. But it's still like a good team with big holes.
Yeah, I think he tried to patch up his hazard issue as best as he could with the last two Mons. Although the first 8 Mons themselves are like insanely good as an offensive core. Like, I would actually put this at probably like a 9 out of 10 offense, honestly. And you had it as 8.5, so it's good. I do like the team.
Only reason I had it 8.5 was I think because it was a little bit setup reliant, but it's still very fucking good. And very hard to stop just because Zygarde Fina are so fucking fat too. But yeah, moving on, we have the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, coached by Troy. I'm just kidding. His team is the absolutes with the Excadrill, T-Tar, Primarina, Mienshao, Shaman, Terracigilith, Dracozolt, Megabanette, Darmanitan, Scolipede, and Fat Cow. Honestly, I think this is the team that had, I think, the scariest Terra. I've probably said that like 8 times now, but I do think that Sigilith is probably the scariest Terra. Though I think Slurpuff and the Gator are close. So, when I looked at this team, it's very Gen 5. With the Sand, Mienshao, Darmanitan, Scully, and Sigi. So that's cool to see. But it kind of has similar issues to like a lot of the other teams where he lacks removal somewhat, with Sigi being Defog, where I don't think Sigilith really likes running Defog, especially because Sigilith usually doesn't give a shit about defogging for itself anyways, because Magic Guard. And Excadrill is not the best spinner, because I think I'd rather like Swords Dance. Though Rapid Spin, I guess, could be a speed boost option if he doesn't want to bring T-Tar and bring Sand to screw the rest of his team. Like, I feel like Darmanitan and like Primarina hate Sand, but it's not up constantly, so I don't have like too big of an issue with it.
Yeah, I do tend to agree. I think the team overall is pretty good. My favorite thing about it is I'm not going to be as wishy-washy as Waka. Terracigilith is the best Terramon that is allowed in this particular format, purely because Magikarp Cosmic Power is so impossible to break, especially when all the decent Dark types in high tiers are banned. As well as just Sword Power can get out of hand so incredibly quickly. It's basically just the low tier version of Terra Espartha, without the speed boosting, basically. Instead, it just sets up on both defense wings, and that in and of itself is enough to make it really, really, really scary. I do also really like the Sand Core here. I think Dracozolt is one of the more underrated mons in draft. I think if people don't prep for it, it can just 6-0 teams basically on its own. Because its stab combo is so good and Bolt Beak is so damn strong, and adding that onto an Excadrill, which really only doesn't break bulky waters and occasionally bulky grasses, they go extremely well together. As for my issues with this team, I think the two main ones, outside of the ones Waka already named, are the fact that his fairy resists are not good at all, and this team is pretty Terra Fairy weak. It basically relies on Excadrill to revenge it because of all the fairies that get Mystical Fire in that decks. So, like, EDAM-I, if it was allowed in this format, would absolutely be bonkers against this team. And the other issue as well is that his speed is very reliant on Scarf's speed boost and Sand, which is not the hugest issue in the world because his team is structured in such a way where he can compensate for that fact. But if you take all of those factors I just mentioned away, his fastest mod is 111, or I think 113, depends on what Scolipede is. And that can...
112.
112. Yeah, I was dancing around it, and that could cause some issues. I definitely agree with your rating here, Waka, where the offense is probably one of the better ones in the league, and the defense is okay, and the hazards are okay, and the utility is okay. The biggest issue is the lack of good removal outside of Drill is basically what you mentioned. But overall, I think it's a pretty good team and deserves its spot basically smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, I think this is number 9. So, now that we're through number 9, we're at the midpoint, 45 minutes in, holy shit. Oh, It's my team.
So
hi,
I was gonna say, would you like
Wacko.
to tell? Oh.
Hi, I'm Wacko, coach of the chilling. Fuck, I can't talk. I'm the coach of a chilling reception. Here with no chilling reception users and no slush rush users. With the Como-O, Iron Treads, Fat Blob 1, Diancie, Thunder, Therian, Mega Beedrill, Incineroar, Superior, Obstagoon, Fat Blob 2, and Fat Blob 3. This is probably the weirdest team I've ever drafted, being that I've never used, I've used a lot of these mons before. I've never used Reuniclus, Thundy, Jealous. No, I've used Jellicent before. Damn, it might just be those. And Beedrill. But those are not mons that you, like, see often. But, the things that are cool about the team is that it has Como-O in a format where the best fairy type was probably Alcremie that no one drafted.
Well, Feeny, but...
Well, yeah, sure. I'll give you that one. Yeah, it has Como-O in a format where there's not a lot of fairies. And in general, it has a lot of mons where people aren't gonna want to switch in on a lot of things. As I played my game earlier today, my week 1, where Jellicent with like barely any special attack investment kind of sat there and clicked Scald, and my opponent really could not switch in on it. So even that being like one of the weaker mons on the team, like no one wanted to switch in on that. And it has some good rockers, and it has good pivoting with like Thundy and Treads, Incineroar, Obstagoon, Mega Beedrill. And it has some good utility with like Superior, Jellicent, I think, Reuniclus, Diancie, and Treads. But some of the issues kind of come from me lacking hazard removal. Technically, I have more hazard removal than like everyone else, but everyone is so bad at using hazard removal that I was pretty much forced to bring Avalugg to my week 1 because Thundurus, Beedrill, and Superior never want to click Defog. And Treads usually, it's not a bad Rapid Spinner, but it kind of struggles to fit Rapid Spin on some of its sets. Kind of similar to Excadrill, where if it's like Excadrill in the sand could just click Swords Dance and click moves, where Treads is more like I'd rather pivot around with like Volt Switch or run other moves that hit things like flying types like Zapdos or whatever, like run Stone Edge so that I'm not walled. So the removal really sucks. So your comments?
So to add on what you already said, the hazard removal is probably one of the larger issues. Yeah. Although I will say, I think this might be the first time I've ever liked one of your teams more than you. And the primary reason behind that is because I would use 4 words to describe your draft, and those 4 words are annoying to prep for. And that is because you have a lot of things that force you to play a certain way. There's a Como-O that basically forces a fairy. There's a Reuniclus that basically forces either a Taunt or Encore Dark type. There is a Terra Diancie, which basically forces you to bring your Steel. There is a Thunder Therian, which forces you to bring your Electric. There's Mega Beedrill, which forces you to bring Priority. There's Superior, which forces you to bring anything that resists Leaf Storm. So there's a lot of things that are just incredibly annoying to deal with. But the downside to that is that all of them have defined counters. And the other pretty large issue that I see for you is that your team is incredibly weak to physical priority, as I've already told you. First impression, Ice Shard, Sucker Punch, Mach Punch just do an absolute number on you, and you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's another reason why this is the only team where I think Avalugg has ever looked good or useful than just being an Ice type, because why not add an Ice type and Rapid Spin? So, yeah, it's like a bit of a struggle, and a lot of my walls, like my walls that have recovery, are also dark weak.
Also,
I guess Diancie, Draining Kiss can count, but yeah.
Also, you're very heavily reliant on Ryun to check a lot of stuff. Like basically Ryun is coming 9 out of 9 weeks, probably as a defensive set. It'll bring Calm Mind or some other things. Some weeks, but it's always going to have defensive investment, because otherwise you just don't check stuff very well.
Yeah, I think that makes TRK happy. If I use Reuniclus 9 weeks out of 9, that makes him happy.
Yeah, you also have
that's why this team's number 8, though. Like,
it's also ironic that you mentioned that.
Strongs and like really horrible lows.
Also, I'm just realizing that your team is also pretty knockoff weak, because there's a lot of things here that are pretty desperate to hold boots or lefties or just some setup item, and having knock would be really, really bad for your team.
Yeah, probably. That's okay. Anyways, we can move on to number 7, which is Chickadee, coach of the Milwaukee something. Mudsdale. Mousehold, okay. I knew it was an M. Should be Mudsdale. That one's cooler. Anyway, we got the Ursaluna, best mon ever created. Enamorous, the Queen. King Gambit, the ugly evolution of Bisharp. Rotom Heat, the best Rotom. Deoxys Defense, the best Deoxys. Conkeldurr, Inteleon, the best Gen 8 starter. The best Fossil Tyrantrum, Tentacruel, and Terra Cincino with the Terra Ice Triple Axle and 6-0 someone. This team has no Grass type and no Ghost.
Oh, true.
Having no Ghost is not like the biggest issue, but having no Grass is probably an issue. I do like this team though. It's one of those gimmick teams that has an identity and it actually makes sense to me. Where like you Trick Room with Deoxys, although I feel like something like Slowbro would have been better if they grabbed it when I said they should have, but it's fine.
Because Regen would have looked really strong on this team.
Because I've used Deoxys before with like Trick Room Teleport, and some of the issues just kind of comes from like wanting to run other moves, and also being kind of scared of things trying to click knockoff, and then if you're like forced to hard switch into Luna for whatever reason, you don't want Flame Orb to get knocked off, or even like your other mons don't want to take a knockoff really, because there's no Mega Evolution, and a lot of the mons really like having like Tentacruel likes its Black Sludge, Cincino wants like its Choice Band or its I just added a sheet on accident. Did I just... Hello? Okay, we're good.
Hello? Yeah.
I just, like, made his sheet black on accident.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then, like, Tyrantrum wants, like, Choice Band or Life Orb or whatever the fuck Inteleon wants Choice Specs, so on and so forth. So that could be an issue, just being knockoff weak in general. But it has identity, and he has speed to counteract the Trick Room, which was what I was trying to get to like 2 hours ago when I clicked on the slide. Do you have stuff to add? Because I'm losing words.
Honestly, I was just letting you be done finishing talking. So yes, this team is very heavily reliant on its gimmick, but said gimmick is very good. He has a top, let's say, 5 Trick Room setter with 3 of the best Trick Room Mons in Counter, King Gambit, and Ursaluna. And that in and of itself will win him a lot of games, especially getting in one of those Trick Room setters for free. My issues from the team come with the fact that his best remover is Rotom Heat, because Tentacruel is Tentacruel and it's always underwhelming and stupid. And also the fact that if Trick Room fails, he is extremely reliant on Enamorous to save him. Because yes, he has Cincino and Inteleon, which can tend to wear down and finish off weakened teams. Neither is going to be able to win the game by itself, even with Cincino Terra being very, very fun. So Enam does have quite a lot of pressure on it here, as well as the fact that to add on top of that, Dio has major 4-move syndrome, as you just mentioned, because basically every single game to make this team work effectively, it's going to want to be recover, Trick Room, Teleport. So, and then it wants to run 5 different moves in that back half, considering it's literally the only viable hazard setter on this team.
I mean, so the reason why I didn't say anything about that is because I kind of disagree. Because Conkeldurr is slow, sure, but it has Mach Punch and it's fat enough to just live hits and kill shit anyways. King Gambit has Sucker Punch, so it usually annoys things anyways, and a lot of Mons don't like to touch it just because they're scared of losing the Sucker Punch. And Ursaluna gets Trailblaze, which can outspeed like base 90, I think like base 98 Mons.
I mean, +1. Yeah. I mean, I was talking about it like I didn't like the team. I have this team ranked number 6. So it's not like I don't like the team. I actually really do think it's quite good. It's just, I think those issues are going to become prevalent in some ways, even though Sucker Punch and Mach Punch does help, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And let's see. There's like one other thing. The removal is a little bit weak, because Rotom doesn't really like running Defog too much. It can fit Defog, but it's kind of a waste of a shitty Pokemon to run Defog. Conkeldurr also gets Defog, I suppose. And there's also Tentacruel, but I don't really see them using that too much. But it's fine. Moving on, we got Odie with the 420 freeze, with Hydreigon, Aegislash, Mega Sceptile, Alolan Ninetales, Revavroom, Iron Hands, Meloetta, Donphan, Azumarill, Golisopod, and Shitbird. That's not Moltres. So, interesting team. It's like, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at when I look at it, but I don't dislike it.
Yeah.
It has it has good hazards. Well,
you're right. The hazards 5 out of 10. What are you talking about?
But it has like 2 rockers, and Golisopod can run spikes because it can like force switches or whatever. And Revavroom, when it comes to the game, can run T-spikes. And because the best removal on the team is Rapid Spin, at least you kind of keep up your hazards. So it's like bad in a good way. I don't know. I'm just kind of opening my mouth and closing it sometimes.
So The reason why I like this team is actually for a vastly different reason than you. The reason why I like it is because I think Ninetales Alola is incredibly underrated in this meta because of the buff that Ice types got. And as a result of Ninetales' existence, this team makes for actually really fun Veil offense. Because behind Veil, both the top three all do really, really well at just breaking or setting up in the case of all of them, actually. Same thing with Weather and Shift Gear. Iron Hands and Metaletta basically become unkillable behind Veil, especially on the side where they're defensively stronger. And you can't tell me that Belly Drum Azu behind a Veil doesn't sound incredibly scary.
Oh, you were talking about Azu? I was like, you were saying something about Veil, and then you said Iron Hands. I was like, oh shit, that thing gets Belly Drum.
It can also do that as well. The only reason I like that a little bit less is because it doesn't have a good priority to abuse. But yeah, no, it has. But this team has really good parts. I actually rated it lower than you, but it still has good things going for it. It feels like one of those teams where you question what the hell they're doing, but because the mons on the team are good enough and the synergy doesn't completely suck, he'll still have ways to win, and more so than pretty much everybody below him. So I do like the team overall. The weaknesses, as you mentioned, are namely hazards, with the best hazard setter on the team being Stealth Rock Donphan and the best remover on the team being Rapid Spin Donphan. So that thing's just gonna have a lot of pressure on it to do both of those things, and it takes away some of the utility that Donphan does provide, being able to be a really strong Earthquake user, knockoff user, getting decent priority with Ice Shard. Also, side topic, his team has the best priority in the div by some margin. Like Shadow Sneak, Aegislash, even Ice Shard, Ninetales, even though that's not great. Iron Hands gets either Bullet Punch or Quick Attack, I forget which. Ice Shard, Donphan, Aquachet, Azu. Well, either way, the priority is still awesome, and then Gillespie Spot obviously being one of the strongest first impression users. So overall, I do like the team. It's a little on the weirder side, but it's good overall.
Yeah, it's definitely just an interesting team, but hopefully it doesn't rely too much on Ninetales, but I don't think it will. But yeah. Moving on to number 5, we got Steven with the is it the Little Root Lycanrocs?
Yeah.
Okay.
With Little Rock Lycanrocs.
Oh, Little Rock. I was thinking Little Root, like the town in Gen 3. So he's got Greninja, Infernape, Rillaboom, Hatterene, Sandy Shocks, Skarmory, Dragonite, Basculegion, Mega Audino, Terra Drapion, and Ursaring. I do like this team, even though it has the worst starter trio on it, minus Rillaboom. And it has the worst hazard setter on the team, called Skarmory. But it has Hatterene, which is one of the better fairies that was left on the board, and Dragonite, which in a format without a lot of things to hit it is probably going to be pretty insane. They also got Double Fairy, I just noticed, with Mega Audino.
True.
And Terra Drapion is interesting, although unfortunately I feel like it might be the worst Terramon that was drafted.
Well, there's one coming up in one of the higher rankings that I might disagree with, but otherwise, yeah.
Oh, actually, I don't disagree with you. There is one Terra user I think that's worse than Drapion. It's not horrible because it does get Swords Dance and it is fast, I do like Drapion as a Pokemon. It's just a little strange. As a Terramon,
Yeah.
I think Ursaring is better, probably.
I would agree.
But, yeah. It
So-
has a lot of pivoting, which is cool. And Basculegion, which is always a plus because that mon is fucking insane. And he can run both genders, in case people think that he can only run male. Because I feel like someone's only going to prep for like one gender, and he's going to bring the other. And they'll mauled. But it's fine. Anyways, your thoughts?
So, I'll be honest, this feels like a team I would draft, to be honest, which is kind of funny to me.
Sure, it has Greninja, so it has to be your team.
My biggest issues with the team is it's very Hurricane weak. Like the only flying resists are a mon that's weak, especially defensively, and a Shocks. So that's gonna hold it back from getting a higher rating from me. But in general, I do really like the team. I think this team could really use a slow pivot. I think the defense is better than most people would probably give it credit for, but the only even attempt at a slow pivot is Hatterene. And a lot of the mons here, even though they're all very scary, I think Grand, Infernape, Rillaboom, Dragonite, and Basculegion are extremely good offense. I think all of them, because they like setup or they're frail, prefer to be let in for free as opposed to having to switch directly into themselves. Also, this team's hazard removal is pretty bad. If people realize that Hatterene doesn't give magic bounce to somebody's entire roster.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's a good team and definitely well deserving of being in like the top third, which is more or less where it is.
I actually am also noticing that his only fairy resist is Skarmory.
True.
But I
True,
mean,
because
but like stuff like Mega Audino and some of his other mons don't really care too much about fairies.
his defense is honestly okay. I don't really hate anything about it. Probably the worst thing about his team is honestly the fact that he drafted a random Sandy Shocks that actually kind of hurts his team. I feel like his team would have been quite a bit better if he was able to split that into like a better bulky ground and get like a eel or just get like a good electric that can hold specs. Because basically if Rillaboom gets Skullburn, this team cannot break bulky waters well.
Yeah, that's sort of true. He can covert cloak it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might
Yeah,
be
so, but overall, I do think it's good. I think it does have probably the best hazards of any of the teams. The only major downside being that it has to rely on Drapion for toxic spikes, which is okay. But if you're carrying it, you want to do what you said and click SD a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Because I think Steven already played a game, and it was, I think, versus Jeg, and the Drapion just kind of didn't do damage, like, without setting up. So it really does need a setup to actually do anything. Otherwise it really just won't. But yeah, still a bunch of good mons, good team. Moving on to number 4. For the team that I think thought they'd get last. I don't know why the fuck he thought he'd get last. We got Voids with what's his team? The Regenerators? Regenerators? I don't fucking know. We got Corv, Claude, Skeledirge, Hoopa, Unbound, Thundurus, Hex RS, Tauros, Paldea Water, Tapu Bulu, Diggersby, and Galvantula. I from the start, this was one of the weaker teams because generally I don't like seeing defense drafted so early, but they patched it super well at the end with literally all of the mons at the end up being pretty offensive. Although my one thing is that a lot of the mons are a little bit physically oriented, but Skeledirge, Hoopa, and Thunderous, and like Galvantula to an extent, is decent enough special offense. The hazards are also like not great, but Clodsire alone is probably better than most teams.
Yeah.
And Corviknight as removal alone is better than most teams. Along with Thunderous is like, if you want a 4th slot defog, in case you're dying on the last turn, you might as well just Prankster defog.
So for me, I agree with you. I think this is the best defense in the division. It's just going to be really, really difficult to break, and I don't like that. I think Webbs was a really clutch pickup for him. I think this team's offense is very slow and suffers to a slightly different problem that TRK's team did, where outside of obviously Dragon Dance Haxorus, this team gets revenge killed a lot. But overall, I do really like it. I think it deserves its spot all the way up here. I also had it for. I think this team is a good combination of annoying defense to break. Double unaware is annoying. I hate that we let him get that.
Yeah, and the thing with it is because of the lower power level, that Clodsire and Dirge are able to wall so much more things. Because I prepped for week 1, like, as, like, anyone else trying to prep for this team, like, he pretty much invalidated my top 2 mons entirely. To the point where I was forced to bring, like, some pretty different things just to break through his stall core. But, like, if he can break through, like, your offense with, like, Thunderous Hoopa, because honestly, Thunderous is really hard to prep for, and Haxorus Hoopa can kind of one-shot things after they set up, or, I mean, Hoopa is just Hoopa, and, like, Tauros can, like, terrestrialize setup. If he can, like, break through your offense, then there's no way to break through his defense.
Pretty much, yeah, and ironically, I feel like this team is the inverse of the usual, like, quote-unquote standard way of drafting, where most people would say draft your nukes early and get your defense in mid-tiers. He still got both, and they were both very good in their own right.
There's not a single bad one.
Yeah, like the top 3 plus Paldea and Tauros are just basically impossible to break. And if you are really worried about your ground weakness, he happens to have the only grassy terrain setter, except for obviously Rylobloom. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, Hoopa, Thunderous, Haxorus is enough offense for most teams, and that's not even mentioning the Diggers being Galvantula. There's just a lot of really, really strong mons. Not overly setup dependent. Bandit Haxorus is actually really, really strong and does help his team in some ways because Bandit First Impression is kind of need. But it's overall a very, very, very solid team and one I'm not looking forward to playing.
Yeah, it was definitely a struggle trying to prep for it. So, good job with drafting this. Like, actually, I can't believe that these, like, the top 6 alone, I'm surprised we're on the same team.
Yeah, 100%.
Moving on to our number 3, we got Ryan with the...
So...
What's his team name? I think it's the...
So Ryan is the friggin' Reg Ice Slice, coached by Mr. I don't fucking know Ryan. His team is Eoscarata, Quakeval, Weezinggaller, Mega Aggron, Azelf, Arcanine, Gudra, Electros, Porygon Z, Palossand, and Torn Eye. I will say right off the bat, my least favorite part about this team is he has the worst Terra user of anybody that drafted it. I think Terra Gudra is pointless. It is literally just a blob that does nothing with zero setup potential. So, and because it doesn't get any actual recovery, I think it's easily the worst Terra that was drafted. Aside from that, though, I love every single mon that he drafted in the top 5. Masquerada and Quakeval are both just so strong. Quakeval especially in like a reduced top level league like this one, can just set up and roll over teams so easily. It's very, very strong, and I think it's going to be super good for his team. I think his defense overall is quite good. Mega Aggron is extremely underrated. Weezinggaller is strong, even if it does get broken through pretty easily. Palossand Eel is also a pretty nice way to round it off. Probably my biggest issue with the team is the fact that Weezinggaller and Aggron are both so physically defensive dependent. But otherwise, this team is quite good outside of the crappy Terra user.
Yeah, even I don't think Gudra's like the worst user. I think I still rated it like probably like a 4 out of 5. It's
yeah,
not
you have
like
it as 4 out of 5 on here.
Huh?
Yeah, you have it as 4 out of 5 on here.
Yeah, because Gudra's still like it's still like a stats mon where like its stats are all good except I guess defense could be better, but I mean, it has a lot of things that it could do. It could still tear poison, slug bomb things. It could tear grass. It could tear water with sap sipper. Or ground or whatever the fuck it wants to do. Like, it has a lot of options still, but it's not the strongest Terra. Which was Rage's point, pretty much. And overall, I still like the team a lot better than most, obviously.
Yeah.
The removal is a little bit weak because it's mostly Weezing because Quakeval or Quakeval, I don't know how you pronounce it, probably doesn't come in too much to Rapid Spin specifically, unless you're P-McGee, because I saw him do that like 8,000 times. But Weezing can fit Defog usually, and Torn can defog, I suppose. That's kind of it. It's not bad though, and there's a lot of good hazards.
I will say overall, even our critiques of it were more nitpicks. Like, this is easily one of the most complete teams in the entire division. And just the pure breaking power and threats that it has with Porygon Z and Quakeval alone make up for some of the lack of offense that the rest of the team would have. And obviously Masquerada's really, really good at being annoying because it's basically Gren, but kind of better.
Yeah, and the only major issue I have with this team is, other than Gudra and like Assault Vest Electros, the special defense is
pretty bad.
Kind of bad.
Because
a lot of the defense early on was heavily focused on physical defense for some reason, but it will still probably work.
It does rely heavily on Palossand.
Palossand's a Fizz Death wall.
Yeah, but it does have, ironically, some of the better Spadef stats on this team, and that typing makes it pretty good for that still.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess so. I think Palossand could have been a better Terramon too, or Eel.
Honestly, yeah.
But yeah, it's not the worst thing ever, and Gudra's good enough. It's good enough. Moving on to number 2, we got Feet. The team that didn't draft the fairy got number 2. It's mostly
I
just
mean-
this top three, and like the offense in general is just kind of insane. Even with like the lack of speed, because Iron Moth is the fastest Pokemon. This is actually. Is this team slower than Tier K's? It might be. It just doesn't look as slow because the top mons are actually fast.
Technically it is because Iron Moth is the fastest at 110 and the second fastest is Charizard at 100.
Yeah. Yeah, so this team is technically slower, but the top mons are faster, so it's not as bad.
Yeah.
This team also has no fairy, but fairies are like so last year anyways. But yeah, anyways, good offense, literally everything. Even Orthworm like can coil or iron defense and like body press everything to death for coil iron tail. Kind of hits hard, or it can just, you know, shed tail and then you can't deal with like Zardex, for example, because you're gonna want to click ground moves on Zardex usually, but you can't click ground moves on Orthworm, so good luck with that. One of the issues though offensively is that even though that there's like 4 removals, it's not the best. Like, it's mostly Blastoise, Rotom, Mo. Or actually, no, it's more like Landorus and Blastoise than Rotom. But it might struggle.
Yeah,
with
Lando's actually pretty good removal.
It might struggle. with
Lando's actually
Zard
pretty good
or
removal.
Zard.
Yeah, that's true. So, to me, this is how every single Uno game should start. He should lead with Orthworm, click Shed Tail, and then go into whichever of these literal 7 good setup mons or cleaners that he has works best and get like 3 kills. Like, this team was the number 1 to me, because even though I think both the number 1 and number 3 on this list are more complete teams, this team is just a nightmare to deal with, because basically Uno is going to be able to just take any small opening that you give him and set up and just win. Like, he has enough good support for his sweepers that basically any opening that he gets is just death.
Pretty much, yeah. And
Also,
I don't know how he got those top 3 together. That's just
that too is just dumb. Also, I think it has one of the most underrated Terra users. Even though it's not liable to sweep the entire team, Terra Metacham is just so fun.
Oh yeah, Terra Metacham is pretty underrated. Just being able to Terra fighting, and I mean, it's probably better than Mega Metacham, so might as well. It is a little bit weak, like, defensively. Like, it doesn't have good stats, but I mean, its purpose is to hit hard. If something dies, GG.
Yep.
He probably could have done something else other than Metacham, but I don't have an issue with it. And he probably could have also done something better than Iron Moth, because double fire is a little bit strange.
It also
but it also sort of baits in more earthquakes for Orthworm, so that way he can Shed Tail more. So that might be the idea.
It also kind of pigeonholed his points a little bit, even though he made it out pretty well, because all 10 mons on his team are extremely viable. Yeah, it's just, the team's scary. Whether it's good remains to be seen, but it's extremely scary.
Yeah, that's a mess to prep for. So good luck, and have fun to people that have to play it.
Yeah. Very true. Okay.
That was our number 2. So moving on to number 1, we have you.
Yeah.
By the way, he had no he didn't rank these at all. It was all me. So
Yeah. Actually, when we started this recording, it was my first time seeing these rankings. But yeah. So as Waka did, hi, I'm Rage. My team is the Buffalo Toros. My team consists of Walking Wake, Zera Aura, Tinglu, Tinkaton, Moltres, Slitherwing, Delmise, Aetera, the Dunsparce, Starmie, Overquill, and the Goat Vulpix. Waka can take it away because I feel like I'll talk bias.
So, this team has some of the best composition I think I've ever seen from one of your teams, because usually, similar to what you said about my teams, usually I dislike your teams. But this is one of the teams where, other than the useless Vulpix meme pick, I don't dislike anything. And it makes sense to me. So let's see, you have very good hazards just to start. You have Tinglu, which is fucking good enough. If that was your only hazard setter, that's still fucking A+. But even on top of that, you have Overquill, which sometimes I see Overquill can just click spikes and then like it could Swords Dance into self-destruct because it doesn't get explosion for some reason. And then you have 2 rapid spinners, which is very nice because your team loves to click spikes, especially like Zera Aura loves spikes. I think Walking Wake loves spikes. I mean, everything loves spikes. What doesn't? And then you have some good pivots, like Slitherwing, Moltres, Zera, Starmie. Is that it? That might be it. Oh, the Dunsparce gets Baton Pass too.
Yeah.
You also got some good utility with like Tinkaton, with it gets T-Wave, Encore, Stealth Rock, Knockoff. I will say, I guess, other than Tinkaton and like Zera Aura, like you don't have good knockers, but usually one of those will have knockoff. Even Delmise likes to fit knockoff sometimes. It's just that your dark types don't have knock, but it's not like a huge issue. And you even have like an anti-trick room option with Starmie if you feel like running it.
So to try and talk
more.
So to try and talk unbiasedly about my team, in general, I agree with what Waka said, where my hazards are one of the better things about my team. I get hazards up extremely easily, and nobody can really stop me. I also think, outside of Zigalith, I think the Dunsparce is just gonna wreck some people. Like, because of its stats being so good and because of Combine Boomers being so threatening, it's just going to murder some people and it's not going to be able to stop it. Probably the weakest portion of my team, if I had to pick one, is Walking Wake is a little bit of a crutch when it comes to saving my special offense. Granted, it's probably the best crutch I could have in this particular dock, but it's still a crutch. My only other viable special attackers are Moltres and Starmie, so if I had to pick like a weakness, that's probably it. Which is hence I'm gonna assume why I could put my offense at 8 as opposed to having it a little bit higher. But overall, I think the team is very complete, and I drafted this team to have fun, and yet I ended up drafting one of my better rosters, I think, because I just have options galore, and when you prep how I prep, that tends to be the best possible thing for me.
Yeah, you also have the Dunsparce, which is a really good special attacker, just because Boom Burst coming off of its special attack stat is really good.
Yeah.
And Terra Normal if you felt like doing that. But yeah, I didn't really notice that issue. I even think Delmise is a really solid special attacker. Because I mean, I ran it like 8 times and it worked. So.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I didn't really see any bad mons. I really don't like Slitherwing, but I've seen other people use it really well, so I don't really have too many gripes with it. Even as like a defensive mon, it works.
And also the biggest...
It does things for like Moltres and Tinkaton too, where it can like stun Spore or Wisp for them.
And the biggest thing for me as well with it, and the reason why I think it's so valuable, is because first impression is by far my best priority, and that can definitely save me in certain matchups.
Yeah, and other than, I think, Zeraora, or not Zeraora, Regieleki, you have Zeraora, which is the fastest mon that was drafted by far. Other than Mega Beedrill, which I can't, I mean, they can't hold items, so you have that going for you too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's true.
Good team. I think, unironically, this could have been a good Rain team, low-key.
Kinda, actually, yeah.
Like, everything benefits from Rain, except for, like, specifically Moltres fire moves, but Hurricane is a thing. But yeah.
Yeah, and also Tinglu doesn't like having boosted water moves in its face, but apart from that, I agree with you. It could have been a good Rain team.
That's true. So anyways, thank you guys for watching PRs, and thank you, Rage, for doing PRs with me. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. It was a lot of fun. I had fun making fun of everybody's team. If you have complaints, please direct them to Laga's inbox.
Yeah. If anyone needs help with like team building, I can try my best to help you. I'm not like the greatest sometimes, and I have some weird techs and weird opinions. But if you want to throw ideas at me, sure, go ahead. My DMs are always open. And thank you for watching.